Our guest today co-wrote a book called Dion, the Rock and Roll Philosopher. Conversations on life, recovery, faith, and music. Boy, that's a mouthful. I have been listening to the songs of one of these guests, who just happens to be a rock and roll pioneer, since I was a kid, and have sung to the lyrics of his songs many times. His music is as catchy today as it was when the songs were mega popular, starting in the late 1950s. His band, Dion and the Belmonts, are rock and roll royalty. Welcome to the Motivation Show, Adam Jablin and Dion 𝐸𝐤𝐤.
It's a joy to be here, Eli. Great to be here with you.
Thank you for having us.
Well, it's great to have you guys here. And how did you cats actually meet each other? How did this all start?
I met Adam right up the street. There's a school called St. Joan of Arc, and he was 12 years old, and Sister Immaculata asked me to come up and do a little concert for the kids. They were like, was it pre-middle school or middle school?
Middle school. Middle school.
And pretty precocious kid, you know. He started asking me a lot of questions. And later on, like I've been clean and sober 57 years, and Adam has like 18. Yeah. And you know, when he was 30, he come into this spiritual 12-step based recovery program, and we became fast friends, and we've been having lunches and interesting conversations for the last 18 years. So we started documenting some of them, because everybody that showed up went, wow, what are you guys talking about? Everybody, I wish my family was here, my friends were here to hear these stories. So we did an Audible book, and we did the book. There's about 60 stories in the book.
Yeah, and you guys actually met here in Boca Raton. We got to say that, right? Down here. And New York South, right?
Right. We did, yeah. The school is right up the street, and we live here, not 15 minutes. Yeah. Yeah,
you're eating a lot of my favorite restaurants down here in Boca as well. That's where you guys have formulated the stories in this book, you know, while sitting there having lunches and dinners, right?
It helps, you know, you have a good meal, and it helps you open up.
There you go.
It helps you open up and talk about things that are important.
Yeah. Well, I have a confession to make, Dion, which I actually kind of confessed to you before the podcast, to be perfectly honest. But, you know, I grew up in this outer borough called Queens. Will you hold that against me?
Well, it doesn't have an X in it, but, you know, the boroughs are the boroughs, man. You know, it's the same thing. It's all the same. So we're neighbors for sure, and we're, yeah.
So how did the name Dion and the Belmonts originate, and how was it like growing up in the Bronx? And tell us about your gang. Who are these guys, the 14 Baldies?
Well, you know, I was in a gang. I got this record contract, and, you know, they started talking to me about some background vocals and stuff, and I said, listen, let me go up to my neighborhood, and I'll recruit the best doo-wop singers in the neighborhood, and I knew them. One guy was Carlo. I always saw him up at Tally's pool room, and there was another guy, Fred Milano, who that's my phone. It sounds. I put it on church bells in case it goes off in church. So. Yeah, Freddie Milano just slept on the jukebox, so I went up and recruited him. And Angelo DeLeo was a kid from you know, a close neighborhood, and he was an opera singer, and he had a beautiful voice. And man, put this group together, brought them down to Laurie Records, and we were looking for a name. And you know, back then you had to get a name that suited a gang, a bowling team, and a rock and roll group. You know, like Strawberry Alarm Clock wouldn't work, or the Wallflowers. It's not a good gang name.
Not at all.
So we called ourselves Dion and the Belmonts. We thought it'd be good for a bowling team, and a gang, and a rock and roll group.
And it worked. There you go. So thanks to you guys, I have this beautiful coffee table size book, beautifying my coffee table. And Adam and Dion, how did you guys, what were the inspirations for the creation of this book? This is a lot of work here. This is not like a little tiny little paperback.
Well, Dion's my mentor. And when I came into that spiritual 12-step program, I was thirsty for knowledge, and I just hung on every word he said, every word he said, and he would give me the time, and he would give me the wisdom, and he would give me the direction, and he would give me the love. And that says a lot about somebody in Dion's stature and character, to want to give, to want to pass it on. And he taught me, you don't get to keep it unless you pass it on. But as we would go to these lunches together, our conversations would go way beyond what I was just learning in these meetings, but I was learning about life and love and family and responsibility and relationships and faith. And we would have these conversations together. And over time, and obviously, with Dion's life, it was illustrated with unbelievable experiences, with people that you'd always want to meet or you've heard of, or it would just catch your eye. It was like you were just brought into this world. And I just remember saying to him, I just wish everybody could hear these stories. I just wish everybody could hear these stories. And he looked at me, and we were at pizza time, I think, and he said, well, why don't we just start, jotting them down? We really didn't even have that thought yet. We just thought, let's just document these. And little by slowly, we would write them together. He would send me voice notes. And before you knew it, we had these stories.
Before you knew it, 5 years.
Yeah, exactly, 5 years, yeah. But we were enjoying the process, we didn't have a
labor of love.
Yeah,
for sure. Then
we started putting pictures together with it from his past, from now, and look, it was a lot. It was a fun project.
Yeah, it's I called it the rock and roll philosopher because a philosopher is a lover of wisdom, and we all love wisdom. And the art of philosophy is making good distinctions. And if you make bad distinctions, it's bad philosophy. And I thought, well, your philosophy is perfectly designed to get the results you're getting in life. So where you actually see your belief system, I mean, people could believe anything. They could be a Christian, or they could be Jewish or Muslim, whatever your belief system is. Where you actually see it is in relationships. You see it physically with your wife, with your friends, with your coworkers. That's where it actually plays out. And so that's what the stories are about. How you actually could touch it, how it actually plays out in your life. And usually in these stories, we kind of put a life lesson, how you get through the bumpy times in life.
That we all have.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, they'll come.
It's not about the bumpy times. It's about how you handle the bumpy times, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Whether it knocks you down or whether you get back up off the canvas. That's for
Absolutely.
sure. Speaking of philosophy and speaking of mentorship, I was just at a Tony Robbins event, and there was a football player, very accomplished. He was in 2 Pro Bowls, and he talks about not so much the accomplishments that he had. He says that the most meaningful moment that he ever had was when he got a chance to throw catch to a little kid, on the sidelines, and he felt like he was a mentor. And he felt that everything, all the pain, all the sweat, all the sacrifice was worth it for that one moment. So I want to commend you on being a great mentor to Adam. I think we all wish that we had a mentor quite like you.
Well, both of us, we're both so into this. We're both into just finding solutions and getting to, a higher pitch in life, a higher reality, once I told my mentor, asked me, he said, how you doing under the how you doing? And I said, I'm doing fine under the circumstances. And he said, what are you doing under the circumstances? So we like to ride above it, you know, and with great peace and wisdom and security and serenity and you know, not escaping reality, but you know, just infusing the culture with some wisdom and trying to. Yeah, we like taking people to a higher good, you know.
I love that, higher good. So, what do you attribute your early success to? You know, there are people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s that would have liked to have had your success that you had in your teens. You know, did you always have this self-confidence that you were a great singer? And did you always have this natural ability to just sing in front of millions of people?
It's a good question. You know, I knew I had a gift. Maybe I didn't define it that way, but I knew it as a kid because I remember singing. I was 13 years old, and I was in Tony Bennett's dressing room. Somebody handed me a guitar and said, do your version of Cold, Cold Heart, because I thought I did it better than him. So I wanted to show him how to actually sing it. You know, that's where my head was at. So I had this, I knew I was good. I could feel it. There was something about, I knew I could communicate a lyric, and I knew I had great rhythm. There's something about, yeah, I just had a natural rhythm. I call myself a rhythm singer because I don't hold notes. You know, I was brought up on Louis Prima and Al Jolson, and I heard all these horn players at the Apollo Theater like da ba da ba da 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 ba ba da ba da 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 da. You know, so I like you give me a rhythm and I could get into it, you know. But I knew I had a gift, but I don't know later on if I had the confidence because I started drinking and using a lot of drugs. So there must have been something missing there.
Well, you know, as with many rock legends, you seemingly had it all from an outsider's perspective. You know, you had the hit songs, you had the adulation, you had the fame, you had the screaming girls probably, you had the power, you had the money. You know, did you feel that you had it all? And how do you think that turned into a debilitating addiction, and what helped you to overcome it?
Well, you know, it wasn't separated. I thought I really felt like pretty special. You know, I started getting one hit record after another, and I could. It's like bowling a strike, and you get up there and you bowl another strike, and then another one. You say, I'm pretty good at this. So I knew there was something. You know, I started to feel like I was special. Now I have the girl of my dreams on my arm. I have hit records. The company loves me, so I have some kind of power or position, and the pleasure and the honor. So I have it. I have it made. You know what I mean? Sometimes I think God will give you everything you want in order to show you what you need, but you have to open up and look. And I wasn't ready to look until until 1968.
So your book examines the music, but also your mysticism. And Paul Simon, in the book's foreword, said that you don't see each other often, but your phone conversations will last, you know, like an hour. And they drift usually more into the spiritual than even into the music. What does he mean by that?
Well, we cover it all because Paul is a seeker. You know, he's a giver. And like his spirituality plays out in action. And there's a beautiful story about him in the book. It's a little too long to get into here, but take my word for it. This guy is a giver, and that's how it plays out. He doesn't, like, if you know, it's like God chooses you, the chosen people. Well, you're not chosen to sit in your chosenness. you sit, you're chosen for the sake of the world, and that's Paul Simon. He's into others, and giving to others, and so we have these conversations on how it plays out again, physically, and we talk about music and family. We cover it.
So, was there an aha moment for both of you, and you just found God and you were able to overcome these addictions? How did your spiritualities emerge and sustain over all these years? How did you stick to it?
You want to start with that one?
Yeah,
Adam?
sure. I'll start. By the way, just from the question before with Paul Simon, being around Dion so much, if you get to speak to him about music and the career, he's all in. Don't get me wrong. He's all in, and he'll share with you anything. He's happy to. But if you start talking about God and spirituality and religion and faith, that's where he lights up. That's really the core of Dion. You know what I mean? So, as easy as he could be on Rick Beato or Rick Rubin or all of these other, places, I see him with Dr. Jordan Peterson and Bishop Barron, and because I know who he is and I know what lights him up. And my faith grew due to the 12 steps of recovery. That's the truth. I mean, I knew there was a God. I believed that there was a God. I didn't have a relationship with God. I was very here and now in the three-dimensional world, and what you see is what you get. And
true scientist.
Yeah, yeah. It just seemed a little too Disney World, Mary Poppins, Tinkerbell, Wish Upon a Star kind of thing. But when you need him, he's there. When you need him, he's there. I'm a Jew from Jersey. I have this experience with a Catholic priest. He opens me up to another dimension. I go to my first meeting. I meet my mentor, and I just became a student. I just became a student. I just became open and willing to listen and willing to learn and willing to share from my heart rather than my head, because my head wants me to look good all the time, wants me to look like the man. My heart wants to show you that I'm vulnerable and that I'm wounded and that I'm scared. And little by slowly, this relationship developed with what I call God.
Powerful. And Dion?
Well, the 12 steps, I never had a real design for living. My parents, my father never had a real job. My mother had 2 jobs. She made about maybe $45 a week. And they were always arguing over the rent, which was $36 a month. And so I thought if I get enough wealth, pleasure, power, and honor, I'm going to be the man. And I did, but it didn't do it. Because it was all outside myself. And so it drove me to this program, this 12-step program. And the 12 steps were gleaned from the disciplines of St. Ignatius of Loyola, this group called the Oxford group from England picked up on it and brought it to America. And that's how it started with me. And that program, the 12 steps, were designed to lead you into union with God. And God created us in such a way only to work well when we're in union with him. And the most courageous thing a man can do is open his heart to his creator, to be open. So I started opening up. I thought I was a pretty tolerant guy, but I wasn't. I was fooling myself. So I became honest with myself and willing to be open and listen, and I started praying. And one day I was jogging. I'm like 11 years in this program, and I used to have this 4-mile loop. I used to jog in the morning, and I uttered the words, "God, it would be nice to be closer to you." and pow, a white light goes off in the pit of my chest, comes out of every pore of my being, and Christ is standing in front of me. And I wasn't religious. I had no idea. I mean, I had a mild Catholic upbringing. I never went to church. My parents didn't either. But I knew who it was, and I felt all this forgiveness and mercy and grace. I come off the floor. I come off the ground. And everything turned technicolor to me. The grass was green, and cars were red, and the sky was blue. And I ran right into his body, right into his loving. He had his arms open. I ran right to him. It's hard to explain. It was like the transfiguration. And I ran home, and I bust through the door, and I said, "Susan," I said, "Jesus is alive." And she looks at me like I jogged too much or I was overheated. She said, "Who doesn't know that?" I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She said, "Yeah, like you're going to believe me." But I tell you, Eli, since that day, I've never been the same. That happened to over like 45 years ago. I've never been the same. I felt like I was rocketed into the fourth dimension, and I could see things and feel things and do things that I was never weren't possible before that experience.
Do you think that God set you up for great success, gave you #1 hits so that you can have a pulpit to spread his message?
I never thought of that. I never thought of that. Listen, whoever I am, wherever I am, I just like to share things that are important to me. It's like, I feel like if they're truly something in my heart, I truly believe, these are the things I like to share with my kids and my wife and my friends. I could talk about a lot of other things, but I think it's important to share what you truly believe,
Well, speaking of this important person, your wife, Susan, you had this song called Run Around Sue. Was it about her?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I met her in the neighborhood like in 1955. I was like 15. She was 14. And, it's a very funny thing. Coming from an Italian neighborhood in the Bronx, it's like the Middle Ages. When you see a girl, you kind of put your stamp on her, or like I saw her first, she belongs to me, sort of thing. And one day she was at the feast in my neighborhood in Little Italy in New York. She was talking to somebody, some good-looking guy, and my friend started saying, "Hey, your girl look at who she's talking to, that good-looking guy over there," and I thought, yeah. So when she came over, I said, "Were you talking to him? Why were you talking to him?" I didn't know how to handle these things. And she said, he was asking for directions to the Bronx Zoo. And I told him, just follow Fordham University down to Southern Boulevard, you got it. I said, "Yeah, but why were you talking to him?" Well, I didn't know how to handle it. I went home, I wrote Run Around Sue. And I wasn't never going to release it. But when she heard the song, because her name is Susan, and when she heard the song, she said, "Dion, that's a great song. You got to release it." So you could, thank God she told me that, because I think it's the biggest song I've ever had,
Well, you talk about in your book how the songs are not necessarily biographies of yourself, they're stories. So, for instance, a song like The Wanderer, which became a huge hit, can get pretty dark in that song. Tell us about how that song emerged.
Well, that song was, I think, a guy named Jackie Burns kind of, was the inspiration for The Wanderer. He was in the Navy, and he would strut down Crotona Avenue in his white tank top with his tattoos and he had a lot of curly hair, and he was like before his time, but he had all these tattoos, and Flo on his left arm, Mary on his right, Janie, Rosie on his chest. This guy deserved a song, and a little of me in that song, a little of all of us in that song. But in the middle of the song, it kind of tells on himself. He says, I roam from town to town. I go through life without a care. I'm as happy as a clown with my 2 fists of iron, but I'm going nowhere. So he sees himself kind of like as a thin veneer of a man, kind of shallow, but he keeps going.
And clowns aren't that happy.
No, they're not, right? Yeah, my grandfather used to take me to the Windsor Theater in the Bronx to see the operas when they came to town, and Pagliacci was one of the operas. I saw it when I was 8 years old, so maybe somewhere down in me, I got that idea for, to put that in the Wanderer.
So Eric Clapton, in the prologue of your book, says you have an essential ingredient. He says, sold, buckets of it. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's a great compliment coming from him. A lot of people don't talk about what a great singer he is. I know he's a great guitarist, but he's a great singer. He's very relaxed and soulful. That's a quality I don't think you could buy or find somewhere. I just think it's a gift. And again, here we go again with spirituality. If you have a gift, and I believe everybody has some sort of creative gift, and and in God's creation, the way He created us, and if I have a gift, there must be a gift giver, and so I don't want it to go to waste. I don't take it for granted. I try to hone it and develop it and get better at it as the years go by. And I mean, Eli, I kid you not, the last 5 years, I wrote 40 of the greatest songs I've ever written, I believe. And I did 3 blues albums with some of the greatest guitar players on the planet, like Clapton and Peter Frampton and Mark Knopfler and Joe Bonamassa. And, I'm just having the time of my life. I feel like I found a privileged way to live. I feel very blessed, that I'm still here.
If you got that, you got everything, right? Well, there's one thing missing here today, Dion, and I'm a little surprised, actually. You know what that thing that's missing?
Scottish bagpipe music.
Why didn't I think of that one? The beret. When did you first start wearing berets? You're so iconically known for it. Why did you like that signature look?
I was going to wear a beret today, but I didn't know we were on camera, so I got my Yankee cap.
So
I got a good story about the beret.
Go ahead.
Though. Is it okay to talk about the play?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So in the Broadway musical coming out this year called The Wanderer, it takes you through Dion's career and into his sobriety. And there's a moment in the play where a young Dion really finds himself, and he's clean and he's sober. And he's got his guitar. He's not, he knows who he is. He's not going to be the next Frank Sinatra. And he knows that he's a rock and roller and he's going to be true to himself. And his mentor in the play gives him the beret. And it like completes a transformation. It's almost like from a Clark Kent to a Superman type moment. And that meant a lot to me to watch that. That really meant a lot to me to see that transformation, especially recovery being so dear to me. I knew what that meant. I could feel it.
It's funny because he talks about me mentoring him, but I had great mentors in my life. Ever since I was young, I've had great people in my life. I don't think I'd be here, without their guidance, Eli.
That's usually what inspires greatness is those mentors, that's for sure. So in 2020 hindsight, Dion, is there anything you would change in your life if you had to go back again?
Well, I'm not going to talk about it, but there were a few things when I was younger, when I was spiritually dead as a doornail and was very selfish, self-centered, that I made some decisions that I have total remorse over, and I wouldn't do again.
Fair enough. I think we all got a few of those skeletons.
Thank God for God's forgiveness.
There you go.
You know.
However, he has humbly admitted it, and he made amends as well. So
I think he's making more than amends.
It shows, the character. It shows the character.
Absolutely, he's come full
Yeah,
circle.
we talk about these things all the time. It's very important to. I'm a guy from the Bronx. Who knows how to take inventory, how to look at yourself? I never thought about it until I entered this spiritually based 12-step program. They have a beautiful. They lay it out how to look at yourself accurately, and man, that gets rid of the clutter, where you can be free to enjoy God's love, because God is love, and you're punished by your actions, not for them.
That's powerful.
You're like the priest says, you're punished by your sins, not for them. God doesn't punish you. One time I was telling my mentor, I said, this guy in the next town, he has a wife and 3 kids, but he left the wife here, maxed out he maxed out her credit cards, and he left her, and he has a whole new family in the other town. I said, how does a guy like that get punished? He says, the punishment for a guy like that is being a guy like that.
Well said. So this beautiful book is taking center stage on my coffee table. So what did you guys feel was some of the most fun things about this book? What do you enjoy most?
Wow. It's hard for me to pick one aspect of doing the book together. There were moments where we were walking around the Bronx together, and I got to see the church, and I got to see where Dion grew up. And I also think doing the Audible book together was a trip. And I got to see even different aspects of Dion's personality. And, when you're making an Audible book, there's like he said, there's 40 songs, and I was learning about the music industry because I had to learn about publishing.
This guy, I got to interrupt. This guy has gifts I didn't know he had. We're doing the Audible book, and I start reading Lou Reed's induction speech. Lou Reed inducted me into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Adam says, "Why don't you call the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and get the induction speech, the real Lou Reed inducting you with the band and the live audience, and while you're at it, why don't you get you inducting Dick Clark with the band and Ahmet Ertegun and introducing you, and Jan Werner and introducing you at the Rock and Roll Hall, and Little Steven inducting you into the American Music Honors, and why don't you call the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?" I'm like, Adam, don't make me work. I'm like, so I called him. I said, and you want to know? The next day, we had them on the computer. That's how fast the Hall of Fame sent them to us. So he kind of has a very creative side to him that I wasn't aware of. But we had a great time doing the Audible book. There are like over 60 songs in it. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No. I appreciate the compliment. So you get closer with these kind of experiences, and I was learning about the music industry, between publishing and writing, and we have the license for the Wanderer in the United States, but not for overseas. You just learn it. The whole thing is a creative process, and I'm so proud to be with him, and I'm proud of the book.
Well, on February 2nd, 1959, at the Winter Dance Party, there were 4 groups on the bill: Buddy Holly and the Crickets, the Big Bopper, Richie Valens, and Dion and the Belmonts. The plane didn't make it home, of course, and some, like Don McLean, called it the day the music died. What did those guys mean to you, and why weren't you on that fatal plane?
Well, Yeah, I was in the room, and Buddy Holly was tired of the bus breaking down. We were crisscrossing the Midwest on this small little yellow school bus, and the heater kept breaking, and the belts kept breaking, and it was quite dangerous when you get stuck between two towns, which are 30 miles each way, and there's a snowstorm, and it's 20 below zero. I mean, you die, So, and we had people screaming on the bus. So he got so tired of it. When we got to Clear Lake, Iowa, he wanted to charter a plane, and he did. And it was a Beechcraft Bonanza. It probably cost $25,000. I mean, if you bought a plane like that, I looked it up last year. It was like $25,000. Now it's like $1 million. So, but it's only a four-seater, one engine, and so they had the pilot, Buddy Holly, and there were two other seats. So we were in the room. We flipped a coin. I won the coin toss, but when he told me $36, he was trying to recruit the guys who were making the money on. We were like the CEOs of the tour, and when he told me $36, that's what my parents were
Forget
arguing
about it, right? $36
all the time. I just said, no, I'm not spending $36 on an hour-and-a-half flight to, Fargo, North Dakota, and so I bowed out. I gave my seat to Richie, and they took off that night. They must have. That plane went down 5 minutes after they took off because the pilot didn't know how to read the instruments, and they call it scud running, or they fly under the clouds when a storm comes in, and they look at the farmhouses, the lights, and the car lights, and the street lights, and they could make their way. But it was such blinding snow that came down. He didn't know which way it was going, and the plane was, wasn't level, and when it's not level and pointing slightly downward, he drove the plane right into the ground. And let me tell you this, Eli, I love those guys. I miss them. They were great. They were great players and songwriters and brothers and just friends. And I miss them on a lot of levels. They taught me so much,
I can't even imagine the music that would have come out of those great artists. Would have been remarkable. And so what I'm wondering is here you've had this sort of monstrous career, and so many artists, it seems like they have their plateau, whether it's 5 years later, 10 years later. If you think about the Beatles, I mean, they had like a 7-year run, and then the others, you got like the Rolling Stones, which have this 60-year run, but they don't really come out with a lot of new music that you can sort of identify with. Like when you think of the Rolling Stones, you're thinking of Jumping Jack Flash. You still think of the 1960s, So why is it that artists don't have that sort of run into the later years, yet they're still out there performing the old hits?
I don't know. I was up at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Dave Marsh was interviewing me, and he said, Dion, he said, you are the only guy from the 50s who is still creative and relevant. And I started arguing with him, and I lost the argument. When I got home, I told my wife, I said, you know what Dave Marsh said? And she said, well, what are you going to do about it? And she turned it into a dare. So I started recording these blues albums, which I had a ball with. But you asked Adam a question about like the fun of the book, and I started thinking about it. And you know what I think the fun of the book is? Like in these stories, there's a lot of people who get, bad times come around. You hit bumps in the road, and if you don't ask questions, if you don't find the wisdom, you get stuck, and they get stuck in it, and they, every day you could hear it. They resentful, and it just their lives get like small and like focused on the problem, which I could see. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like judging anybody, because you got to pay the rent and you got to eat, you know, and times get rough, you know. But Adam and I are so open that I think we're almost available to hear from God above, you know, if or his direction, you know. And in the stories, I think the fun part of it is it's almost like when you're talking about a situation that is very squirrely and contentious, and you with friends or money or wife or kids, whatever the situation is, and you're heavily emotionally invested in it, you can't see straight. It's hard to see straight. And these stories, kind of, the fun of it is that we kind of show you the way out, you know, because that's where the wisdom is, how you grow and make everything better out of this mess. And to me, that's fun. It's dealing in solutions, you know. It turns me on, you know what I mean? And I'm kind of hooked on finding the solutions, because I was the problem. And let me say it in a different way. I am the problem. That's why I need the solution, you know, and I need God's help in my life, because I don't think I could do it alone.
Eli, that's Dion. There you go. So you'll be able to look back and see some of the questions he answered with the music, and when he talks about his faith. And that's the gentleman I know. So, you know, some people have him over here, you know, and but I know him as a, you know, just a man of wisdom and of faith and of God, and truly always helping another person.
Well, besides these rock and roll iconic photos that I see in this book, what really turns me on about this book, and what really draws me closer to both of you gentlemen, is your vulnerability. Because I think in opening up your vulnerability, you bring other people closer to you. Not everybody will share their vulnerability. They keep it close to the vest. But it's in your vulnerability where you...
No, that's where you get people honest, when you start saying, like, look, if I didn't know me, I'd be impressed, but I know me, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, the thing is that it's a beautiful thing, really, to find that thing you're most shameful of in you, and admit it, come clean with it. Like with me, I've been trying to impress people all my life. One day I went to my sponsor. I said, you know, I'm wearing myself out. I just try to impress people. You know, I found out I can do this, so I get on, you know, and I said, but let me ask you something. I told him, Steve, I said, I want to write a great song. There's a difference in just writing a song and writing a great song. Now, I try to write a great... Is that trying to impress people? He said, well, would you write it if nobody ever heard it? And I said, oh, yeah, I would. Because I would want to, like, use the gift that God gave me. I wouldn't take it for granted. I wouldn't want it to rot on the vine, you know. I want to use it. So I said, yeah, I would. He says, there's your answer. So there was a difference. He made a great distinction. And I've been, you know, listen, I learned more from Adam. He makes it sound like it's a one-way street. This guy ran the hugest manufacturing lace plant on the planet for like how many years?
23 years.
Yeah, and he was like, how many employees?
Yeah, we were close to 400.
So I learned from this guy.
Often the mentee is the mentor.
No, well, it's a two-way street here. You know?
But I would bring, you know, when I found myself, and I found God, I would bring Dion's wisdom into the company. I told him that many times, because I didn't have what my dad had, you know what I mean, which was, he was much more of an iron fist. And in those generations, you led sometimes by intimidation. But I was more of Knights of the Round Table and harmony and openness. and I was able to bring these, you have to remember, I had one person to emulate, and now I had somebody else, and I was with these people in my life, I was able to find myself and bring the way we like to live, our spirituality, our faith, religion into the company, and it was great.
Where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah.
Because people talk about, you hear it all the time. I talk about spirituality. But spirituality means not physical. That's all it means. What informs your spirituality? That's what's in the book.
Well, I'm going to go on a limb here and ask a big question, see if I can maybe get a few lines from a cappella, a song from you. And I'll even bring it home for you with the signature line if I have to. Am I asking too much?
I don't know what you're asking.
I don't know, like a teenager and love. I can finish that last.
Why must I
phrase.
be a teenager in love?
Well, yeah, you can sing the phrase, and I'll just bring it home with the signature line.
Oh, you're talking about singing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna bow out of this.
Why must I
Be a teenager in love.
Now, Eli, I know you. If you live to 121, you're going to still be a teenager in love. I could see it.
We all should be. Absolutely. Anything else you guys want to add as we close out here?
It's been a joy. I thank you for. Yeah, it's been lovely.
It's been a joy for me. And ladies and gents, go out and get a copy of Dion, the Rock and Roll Philosopher, Conversations on Life, Recovery, Faith, and Music. It's the best music and philosophy book I've ever read. I can tell you that. Seeing the photos of Dylan and Clapton and Paul Simon and Tony Bennett, the Wolf, the Winter Dance Party poster for the show that became legend. It all gives me goosebumps. Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Dion, for being on the show today.
Eli, our pleasure.
Thank you, Eli. Great time.
God bless.